The more you beg, the longer I'll ride." Those words cut through the midnight air like a knife. Clara Bennett froze where she stood, pressed against the rough timber of the Cross Spur Corral. The Montana night was alive with coyotes yowling in the flats and the wind hissing sharp as broken glass. The moon struck her pale cheek, making her look branded by light. On horseback, Luke Callahan loomed above her, a man weathered as old cedar. His eyes were as hard as creek stone, his voice as steady as a hammer on iron. Clara's heart pounded, but her chin lifted. That warning would not break her. Not tonight. By noon the next day, the storm had passed and the sky turned scrubbed blue, though the wind still pushed grit into every seam and hinge. Clara stepped down from the stage at Bridger's Ford with 2 carpet bags and a spine as straight as the ledger she carried. She was 26, too stubborn to bend, and carried her balance book under her arm like a promise. Trouble had already reached town before her. The stage office was shuttered, a shaky sign taped to the door, "Assets frozen, God help us." The general store offered pity and a rag job. The assay office laughed at her talk of numbers. The saloon keeper squinted and said she had bookkeeper eyes, asked if she could count cards. Clara refused pity, refused rags, refused cards. By late afternoon, one name came to her again and again. Cross Spur Ranch, owned by Luke Callahan, a widower who kept the world at pistol length. People said he was as quiet as a winter grave and about as forgiving. Clara set her jaw and walked the long road out of town. Wind bent the grass silver. Low buildings rose from the prairie, rail fences, and a half-finished barn with ribs showing. Somewhere a hammer rang. Somewhere a cow bellowed like a tired fiddle. At the corral, a small figure peeked through the rails. Freckled nose, serious mouth. "You lost?" the child asked. "Never on purpose." Clara said. "Is your foreman about?" The girl jerked her chin toward the horizon. A lone rider came in slow, square against the sun. Dust folded around him when he halted. He rode like a man who knew the world gave no choice but forward. "You're on private range." He said, "I'm here to make you richer." Clara answered steady, "Your books are bleeding. I can stop the leak." He dismounted, eyes sharp as flint. Luke Callahan. "You have 5 minutes to explain why I should hire Trouble." Quote, "Because Trouble already works here," Clara said, lifting her ledger, "and it's sloppy as a drunk. Let me show you." Something flickered in his mouth, caught between anger and the ghost of a smile. 5 minutes. No more. Luke didn't bring strangers into his house. But somehow he brought Clara. The big, spare place rattled with silence. At the end of the table sat the child from the corral. Not a boy, but a girl with braids and a slate in her lap. She watched Clara like a deer, trying not to be seen. Clara spread the invoices across the table. "You pay top price for salt, but lose pennies per pound on beef to Harper's Mercantile. Freight charges are double what they should be on westbound loads. And this," she tapped a crooked sum, "is either arithmetic that makes angels weep or someone skimming small enough to feel safe." Luke's eyes narrowed. "Who? Your last hand who could read," Clara answered, "or the clerk at Harper's?" "Maybe both. You a schoolmarm bookkeeper." She didn't say riverboat, gambling hall, or the streets of St. Louis. She didn't tell him she'd learned men by their ink before she'd learned them by their eyes. She only said, "I'll earn my keep, or I'll be gone before moonrise." Quote, "Luke crossed his arms trial week, room and board. After that, we'll see. We'll see." Clara said, "I need keys to your cash box and a look at your contracts." "Bold," he said. "Cheaper than ignorance," she answered. A small voice piped up. "Do you ride?" Clara turned. The girl had stepped halfway down the table, hugging her slate like a shield. "I do," Clara said, "and I fall pretty when I don't." The girl's mouth twitched, a near smile. Luke noticed, and something fragile crossed his face like a cloud over water. "The keys are in the desk," he said. "Supper's at sundown. Don't be late." That night, Clara went to work. She stacked invoices by month, pinned them with nails when twine ran out, copied sums in her quick hand. May, Luke's daughter, scratched chalk on slate and kept sneaking glances, as if she had 100 questions but had forgotten how to ask. By sundown, Clara had given shape to the leak. By midnight, she had given it names. At dawn, she and Luke rode into Bridger's Ford. Luke to talk cattle, Clara to test numbers like a sheriff testing alibis. Harper's Mercantile kept accounts in a church-going hand, but Clara's smile was sharper than any sermon. She laid down a brass weight on the counter, and the scale faltered by a whisper. The clerk stammered. Harper himself appeared, took one look at Luke's shoulders and Clara's open ledger, and found himself correcting the calibration error with a red face. Outside, Luke's words were careful. "You came into this with brass." "You brought me for brass," Clara said, tucking the money away. "I won't be your houseplant." "I don't keep plants," he muttered. "They die on me." They rode back in silence, a hawk circling above, the wind sharp from the west. That night, May dozed off with her cheek pressed to Clara's ledger, numbers faintly imprinted on her skin. Luke stood in the doorway, watching the girl breathe, his face unreadable. The days at Cross Spur folded into work. Clara rode fence, tied knots, baked biscuits that sometimes burned but never broke her pride. She copied sums by lamplight and learned to fire a revolver with steady aim. She laughed once, a real laugh, head back, warm as bread from the oven. Luke had to leave the barn, walking under cottonwoods until the feeling left him. One dusk a squall slapped the prairie. Luke came in drenched, shirt clinging to his shoulders like wet hide. Clara took his coat without thinking, set it by the stove, and pressed a towel into his hands. Their fingers brushed. He flinched like a man afraid of a door nailed shut too long. "Thank you," he said, voice rough. "Eat," she replied, low and steady. "You look like the wind chewed you up and spat you out." May filled supper with chatter, stories tumbling over one another. Luke tried to hide his smile. Failed, and Clara saw it. Later, with the lamps out, she lay awake listening to the thunder roll away, thinking of doors and keys you never know you hold until someone asks you to turn them. The prairie does not keep peace for long. By midsummer, whispers of rustlers drifted across every fence line. Cattle missing, gates left open, fences cut as neat as if a knife had done it. Luke cursed under his breath, rode longer hours, and posted extra watchfires. Clara kept her head down, but her ears open. Trouble wore boots in every county, and this time those boots were headed for Cross Spur. It broke on a thin moon night. The dogs went first, low growls swelling into frantic barking. Then came the pounding of hooves, the yells of men who didn't belong. Clara shoved her feet into boots and snatched the nearest tools, one hand gripping a lantern, the other a bucket. May bolted upright, eyes wide and white as silver dollars. Luke caught Clara at the doorway. "Stay inside. Don't give me orders you know I won't follow," she shot back, already running. The rustlers had split the south fence, driving cattle through the gap like floodwater. The lantern's swing caught one man's eye. He leveled his pistol, not at Clara, but at the porch where May stood frozen. Clara hurled the lantern into dry grass short of him. Flames leapt high, eager as if they had been waiting all summer for a spark. Horses spooked, reared, and cut across one another. The shot went wild. Luke's rifle cracked. One rider dropped hard into the dirt. Another lunged up the porch steps, arm hooking tight around May's waist. The girl screamed, flailing. Clara's boots hammered the earth. She swung the bucket like she meant to split bone. It crashed against the man's shoulder with a crack that spun him sideways. May tumbled free. Luke finished it, a single blow that left the rustler gasping in the dust. The fire licked toward the corral fence. Clara sprinted for the pump. May cranked the bucket down, hands trembling but stubborn. Together they doused sparks, while Luke and the night hands whistled, hollered, and turned the herd back through the broken fence. The cattle obeyed like they remembered the language of men after nearly forgetting. By dawn, The rustlers had scattered into the hills. One was wounded, 2 left horses limping. All carried the memory of a fight they hadn't expected. The fire smoldered black and cold. The fence hung ragged as a torn dress. May stood, shaking in Clara's arms, her cheek streaked with ash and tears. Luke watched them, the girl safe, and the woman who had saved her holding her close, and 3 truths struck him at once. He could have lost his daughter. He could no longer imagine losing Clara, and debts like these were not paid in coin. The ranch slept little that day. By sundown, the place smelled of ash, sweat, and strong coffee. May curled on the settee, blanket tucked under her chin, lemon drops sticky on her cheek. Luke found Clara outside on the porch, steps, boots off, her toes pressed against cool boards. "You saved her," he said. "We all did," Clara replied. Her voice was worn, but steady. "But I'll take the credit you're trying not to give." Quote. He almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. He sank beside her, forearms braced on his knees. "After my wife passed, I nailed the door shut. Thought keeping things out would keep us safe. But doors keep out light too." He stared at his hands. "Clara, I'm tired of dark." She looked at him then, really looked. At the jawline he kept locked tight, the grief carried like a stone, the steadiness he showed the world, and the fear he thought he kept hidden. "I came here to balance your numbers," she said softly. "You didn't hire me to fix your life." But somehow the work drifted. "Marry me," Luke said, the words rough but plain. "Not for May's sake, though she'll laugh brighter than she has in years. Not for the ledgers. For me. For mornings on the fence line. For the way you look at me when I speak foolish and you don't flinch." Clara swallowed. The night smelled of sage and smoke. "I don't beg," she said, a faint smile in her voice. "But I do say yes." Luke took her hand. It was calloused and ink-stained, and it was perfect. "Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious to know." Quote, "News in Bridger's Ford traveled the way it always did. Quiet at first, then faster than a prairie fire. Mrs. Abernathy at the general store began eyeing Clara with a smile that said she knew something. The blacksmith hammered with more rhythm than usual, and the preacher's wife slipped a ribbon into Clara's hand with a look that warned not to argue. Luke kept silent, but there was a lightness in his step that hadn't been there in years. They married under the cottonwood where Luke's first wife rested. He had scrubbed the bark clean himself, and he stood tall with his hat in his hand, steady but softer than most had ever seen him. The preacher spoke plain words, the kind that didn't need polishing. May held both their hands at the amen, as if sealing the knot with a child's faith that refused to let go. The ranch hands whooped. Someone found a fiddle, and another slapped rhythm on a barrel. The deacon's wife brought a cherry pie so heavy with fruit it nearly sagged the table. May danced barefoot in the dust, hair loose, face glowing. She shouted to anyone listening that her sums had gotten bigger overnight. Luke kissed Clara with a care that made the onlookers quiet for a moment. Clara kissed him back with a confidence that belonged to someone who knew work and joy were meant to be tied together, not kept apart. That night, after the crowd drifted away, they stood on the porch while lightning flashed across the far hills. "Storms are rolling north," Luke said, out of habit. "Let them," Clara answered, moving closer until her shoulder touched his. "We've got fence to fix tomorrow, beans to count, and a girl to teach how to outsmart coyotes without lying to herself. Storms can do as they please." He turned toward her, voice low. "You trembling now?" She shook her head. "Not anymore." For the first time in years, Luke smiled the deep kind of smile that made him look younger, freer. "Good," he said, "because the more you beg, the longer you'll ride." Clara finished, grinning as she pulled him into a kiss that tasted of dust, lemon drops, and something sweet neither of them could name. Autumn came, and the cottonwoods turned red gold along the creek. Cross Spur held steady. The fence line stayed mended. The rustlers limped away to easier counties. Harper's scale remained honest for fear of the bookkeeper who could weigh a man's blink. Clara's office window faced the yard. She kept a sprig of sage in a chipped cup and a smooth stone May had declared prime. Her ledgers were neat, sometimes smudged with jam from May's sticky fingers. Luke widened the barn to its proper span, and when he hammered the last nail, he stood back with wonder, as if he'd built more than timber. Evening settled soft. Clara read by lamplight while Luke whittled, and May filled pages with horses that looked like clouds with legs. Some nights the wind moaned, but inside the rooms glowed warm. If you stood at the cottonwood and looked down, you'd see 3 shadows in lamplight, steady as if the hard land's ledger had finally balanced. And you wouldn't be wrong.